On Sunday, he reads about contemplation, because Sundays were made for, basically not for Michelob. They're made for contemplation. And we're going into the high end, right up to the top. Because we're skipping all the way to page 197, chapter 10 of Major Barbara and Richard St. Vicar. I believe he's French, though this book is translated to English.
Yeah, Victor.
How the second mode of ecstasy, beginning with wonder, ends in a most fervent desire for devotion. Let us note that the first mode of ecstasy, of which we have spoken above, arises from devotion. But on the contrary, the second mode, which we are now discussing, does not so much begin with devotion, but rather ends with it. In the former case, the soul is brought to the contemplation of truth by its great desire for truth. In the latter, by the revolution of truth, its contemplation, the soul is kindled with devotion. Didn't Darshan say his religion was just devotion? So after you practice devotion, you end up with just devotion? See whether the perchance the scripture does not hint at this mystically. When to the words we quote above, it adds the following. Fair, quote, fair as the moon, bright as the sun. That's exactly it, isn't it? Fair as the moon and bright as the sun. I don't know. Song of Songs. Song of Psalms is Psalm of Solomon, chapter 6-9. Let nobody expect or ask of me a full exposition of these and other words which we have quoted or shall quote, except in as far as the nature of the present discussion requires it as evidence of the truth. Both the dawn and the moon possess light but not heat. It's true that the moon has light but not heat, isn't that true?
It reflects light.
It's not hot. Is the inner light hot or cold? Quiz.
It doesn't have inner light. It reflects the light of the sun.
But the sun has both abundantly. The sun has the heat. For what is lighter than the sun, or hotter? You see, therefore, that this ascent of the mind described here, and the end of which may be compared to the sun, you see, I say that its end is not any kind of devotion, but in the highest devotion possible. Yet it takes its beginning solely from the brightness and illumination of truth. For whereas in the former case, by the great devotion of its fervor, the soul may deserve to be raised frequently to the contemplation of the highest truth, so in the second case, from its wandering and spellbound contemplation of the truth, the soul is gradually advanced to and at last set on fire with the highest devotion. Let us therefore consider the greatness of light and heat in this ball of the sun, and whence deduce the progressive ascent in this mode of mental uplifting and the fulfillment of progress, which begins, as it were, with the dawn and eventually assimilates the likeness of the sun into its being. So you think it's proper to read religious scriptures on Sunday? It's kind of religious, but it's mysticism. Chapter 11. We also skip ahead and work backwards in our contemplation. Though I did read the book forwards instead of backwards. How the second mode of ecstasy sometimes begins with wonder and continues in the same way. You do not say that in this second mode of ecstasy, the manner of human progress always and everywhere leads to the same end. Let us see from outward things what we ought to think about inward things. For if you place a glass of water in the sun's rays, you will see this water reflects the brightness of light from itself to things above it and refract the light without the heat. So also many receive rays of divine revelation, but not all are moved equally to the same power of love, for so that the author of all good things may commend the gifts of his grace to us. He shews different effects. Shews is like shows. He shows different effects arising from the same cause, whether either where the persons or the times differ. Consider from this example, I beseech you, whereas reads or hears this, what this ray of divine shewing. Shewing is an early word for showing. S-H-E-W. And eternal light effects in us, in what way it raises the human intelligence above itself by the infusion of its illumination. Pay attention how the formula for this example suggested to you demonstrates the kind of mental ecstasy of which we have been talking, having similar characteristics. For what is water but human thought, always running downward to low places, unless it be held back by the firm control of an obstacle? Water gathered together in a vessel is thought, intent on meditation, and arrested by its intentness. Is that strange? Water gathered together in a vessel is thought, intent on meditation, arrested by its intention. Is that an analogy?
Yeah.
For what is water
but they take you wherever they want, you know.
But for water is but human thought always running downward to low places. Okay, so human thought is always running down.
By themselves, you don't, unless you control them, unless you put
my thoughts are always running down.
How do you call those things they built? Yeah?
Unless I put contain it with put a dam up into the thought.
You built a dam.
Because my mind is always running downwards.
And then your mouth follows.
My mouth follows. My mouth follows my mind downwards into my actions. For what is water but human thought always running downwards to low places, unless it is held back by the firm control of an obstacle? Water gathered together in a vessel is thought, intent on meditation.
How do you spell dam?
Dam. D-A-M? I didn't even say dam here.
To build a dam, you said.
I said that.
To build it for the water, to retain the water.
Intent.
How do you call that dam?
No, water is gathered together in a vessel. In a vessel is thought, intent on meditation, arrested by its intentness.
I know, but how do you spell dam?
Dam, it's D-A-M.
What is that?
Dam a river.
Oh.
To dam
and
a river.
How it's a dam, you dummy, when you say you dam.
Well, we said here we're holding together, the thoughts are arrested by the water flowing downward.
Dam thought.
Damn my thoughts?
No, what about a dam thought?
A damn
A
thought.
stupid thought.
A damn
How
thought.
do you spell that dam?
D-A-W-N, a damn thought.
D-A-W-N.
That's an undamned thought. It's a damn thought.
W-D-A.
An undamned thought is a damn thought. Right?
Spelled again?
D-A-M and D-A-M-N. And
the one is dam.
An undamned
Not
thought.
a damned. I mean dam, the one for the water, and the one a stupid thought. How do you call it? You dam.
Dam. D-A-M-N. Dam.
The same spelling for both?
No, dam is D-A-M.
D-A-M. And the other is D-A-M-E.
D-A-M-N. What is this? Laurel and Hardy? This is supposed to be a religion class. How could I ever... I'll never get into the priesthood like this. This is embarrassing. And I wanted the Pope's blessing. God.
He's blessing the dams also.
I'm never going to get it.
He's blessing the dam.
Which of the two
said,
popes?
The ones who have pure mind will inherit the heaven.
Who has what mind?
The pure mind, the dam was.
Pure mind. And pure in mind?
No, pure.
Poor in spirit?
Pure.
I am pretty poor, so I shall inherit the earth. So,
Who is poor in mind?
poor in mind. Poor in mind. Poor, committed to being poor? Or what do you mean? We have gone off track.
You have to read your Bible.
I'm going to go back to the Holy Scriptures, as in St. John Richard of St. Vicar, who may have, was it speculated that he may have been the Cloud author, the Cloud of Unknowing, but I can't even remember reading that now because my thoughts have been damned.
You're done.
My thoughts have gone out over the dam so much that I can't remember. Because I say in my poetry, I'm the worst of all the disciples. See, Kabir says he's the worst, but I say I'm the worst, and Kabir is the second to worst.
If everybody says the worst, then
I'm the worst.
Who can tell really who is it?
I'm the worst of all. Water gathered together in a vessel is thought, intent on meditation, and arrested by its intentness.
I'm not going to compete with you.
The gathering of the waters is the meditation of the heart. So you have to sort of gather up your thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Like the dam again.
Do you think you can just be a scatterbrain and meditate?
You should build a dam on your brain.
Can you be a complete scatterbrain and meditate? Can you?
No, you have to have complete focus.
Could we have
That's
like 50 projects or 10 projects or 5?
The more you focus in one thing,
how many projects can we have? Don't we say that we're only capable of executing one project a day?
One thing at a time.
Wait, I'm only able to do one thing a day. That's pretty pathetic. The gatherings of the waters is the meditation of the heart, just as the ray of the sun pours itself into the water, so the divine shewing passes into the meditation. But as the water receives the ray of heavenly light, it's shining into itself, and as we have said, throws it upwards, and it wonderfully raises that ray of light, as it were, above itself, whither, whither, whither it could not at any way have penetrated by itself. And though the difference between the water and the light be so great, yet it impresses on the ray of light, which it gives out for itself a fragment of its likeness, so that trembling itself, it makes the light to tremble, and when it is still, the light is still. Can light be still? I wonder if inner light is still. Because outer light moves through space, doesn't it? The light is still. Well, the light is supposed to be still in your head. The purer the water, the purer the light, the wider the expanse of water, the wider the expanse of light, according to the simile. The shewing, we're doing the shewing of eternal light. Goodness. According to this simile, the shewing of eternal light, inaccessible to man, illuminates his heart and raises the human intelligence above itself, truly above all human ways. There, that ray of the intelligence, being infused with divine light, rebounds in wonder and springs back from the depths to the heights, whither no natural intuition, no effort of skill or human reasoning is able to climb. And the more deeply the splendor of divine brightness penetrates the mind of a man, shaking him by the greatness of his wonder and raising him to ecstasy, the higher it springs up into the most sublime recess of divine secrets. And this certainly must be admitted, that the more fully and perfectly the soul is able to compose itself in inward peace and tranquility, the more firmly and tenaciously it will cleave to this uplifting of the highest light in contemplation, And without doubt, the purer its innocence, the wider its purity, the more clear-sighted it is, so much the more capable it will prove to be for the contemplation of things transcending this earth and the heavens. Chapter 12, that in the second mode of ecstasy, a divine shewing sometimes happens in our meditation. Sometimes. Let us note that the splendor of that divine shewing sometimes occurs after our meditation, and sometimes it forestalls a natural kind of meditation. Sometimes it helps the seeker, sometimes rouses the indolent and wakens the sleeper. Hence it is that the Queen of the South plies King Solomon with questions, and putting riddles to him, learnt all that she asked. 1 Kings 10, 1-3. Hence it is that the angel, coming with light to Peter, bound in chains, shook him free from his languishing sleep. For what saith the scripture of the Queen of the South, who came to hear the wisdom of Solomon, but that Solomon told her all the words that she asked him. Who is this Queen of the South, this inhabitant and lady of the warm regions, filled with desire of seeing Solomon? Who is this queen, I say, but any holy soul, strong in mastering the senses and appetites of the flesh, and the thoughts and affections of the mind, fervent with love for the highest king, the true Solomon, and burning with desire to see him? This queen seeks the king of all wisdom with asking of riddles and frequent questioning, when any devoted soul relying on divine help works hard in her study and search for truth. She hears that which she seeks when she comes to know the things which her own efforts cannot teach her by a divine shewing in the midst of her prayers and sighings. Let us see what the divine word in this place tells us of this queen, when it adds, and when the Queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon, and the house which he had built, and the meat of his table, and the apartments of his servants, and the order of his ministers, and their apparel, and the holocaust which he offered in the house of the Lord, she had no longer any spirit in her. He saith seeing. She is described as seeing, while before she was represented as suggesting and questioning. See, therefore, what she saw, and understand what she understood. It says, when the Queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon, etc., behold how much and what great truths. What are you cooking?
Nothing.
Is that the heat?
Mm-hmm.
Behold how much and what great things are taught to a devout and painstaking soul by the gift of divine shewing. Consider what marvelous things we shall know by celestial showing. When she has beheld them a long time and marveled exceedingly, she will come at last through the greatness of her wonder to the failing of her powers. This is the order by which she proceeds and comes at last to her end. First she seeks and hears, then sees and understands. Lastly she is numbed and faints. She asks what she is to learn. She contemplates what must be admired. She marvels so that her mental powers fail, and she transcends them. The first is the work of meditation, the second of contemplation, and the third of ecstasy. By these successive degrees, the human soul is raised up. Having set out by meditation, she is raised up by contemplation. By contemplation, she comes to wonder. By wonder, to ecstasy of mind. You already see by a clear example that by the force of wonder, a man falls into ecstasy. For what else happened to her when, quote, no spirit was left in her? But an ecstasy of mind, how is it caused but by the greatness of her amazement? I ask, in what way could that queen be without spirit unless her spirit was abstracted from herself? But in this place I remember what another says of himself. I, John, he says, was in the spirit. The Apocalypse, 1:10. Here John bears witness that he was in the spirit, and there the Queen of the South says there was no spirit in her. So what? Was he in the spirit? Was she without spirit? And who was able to interpret this? Was he with spirit or without spirit? The Queen, John. Chapter 13, how in the second mode of ecstasy the divine shewing sometimes precedes our meditation. Let us consider the contingency in which sometimes the divine shewing precedes the work of our meditation, when the human soul suddenly, cast down by the violence of temptation below the common state of human freedom, is raised to the divine shewing, not only to its wonted and stable condition, but also beyond the limits of human capacity. For often, after many signs of its progress, the mind of man is attacked by insistent and importunate temptations, firstly shaken and cast down from the sublime height of its security and tranquility, lest it should miserably and foolishly glory in its own wrecked fortitude under a continuous sequence of struggles. This is shown when Peter, the chief of the apostles, after numerous victories and very great miracles, was held and bound and imprisoned. But by the visitation of the angel he was delivered by a miracle as great as was the cruelty which he is tormented by those ministers, or cruelty. Chapter 14. That the third mode of ecstasy may be caused by the intensity of gladness. You think you can just be very glad? It now remains to be shown in the third place how the human mind may fall into ecstasy and transcend itself through intensity of joy and exaltation. This kind of going forth seems to be sufficiently well expressed in those very words which we quoted from the Song of Songs in the second mode. Quote, who is she, saith the scripture, quote, that cometh up from the desert, flowing with delights, leaning upon her beloved? Song of Solomon, number 8:5. If we rightly interpret the desert as being the human heart, what is this rising up from the desert but the passing of the human mind into ecstasy? The human soul rises up from the desert when it passes beyond itself by ecstasy of mind, when leaving itself altogether and passing up into the heavens by contemplation and devotion. It is immersed in divine things. Seems there's a lot of experts in contemplation, just in Christianity. But the cause of this ascension is allied to and follows upon what is described as rising up, flowing with delights. For what is flowing with delights but to abound in the fullness of spiritual joys? What is flowing with delights but an abundance of true sweetness and infused gladness given from above? Is that like having nectar, true sweetness, and infused gladness? False riches can never produce the abundance of these delights as true joy does. Indeed, they would not be false if they could really show true delight in its abundance, for even unbelievers may enjoy these external and fallacious riches, but they cannot possess joy in any way. Therefore, as often as you lack inward and true delight, even if you abound in outward riches you may truly sing with the prophets, for I when poor and needy. Psalm, goodness, Psalm 86. Therefore, there is no other source from which we may have and possess this flowing of delights and abundance of true joys, but the deep joyfulness of the soul, filled with sweetness by the gift of God. It does not say having delights, but flowing with delights, so that it is not even experience of these delights, but only that fullness thereof which creates and perfects the ascent made from the desert. It is manifest that, however much we progress, we cannot have these delights continually in this mere earthly life. Therefore, when the soul lacks this kind of overflow, she is not able to rise up to this ascent of which we speak, for she must be flowing with delights. For this ascent, I think too that it is one thing to ascend while flowing with delight, and another to flow or bound while ascending, and yet another for the abundance to be cause of the flowing. The abundance of delights, therefore, is the cause of the ascent, when, by that infusion of divine sweetness, the holy soul does not understand what she feels in her inmost heart, insomuch as the greatness of her exaltation and joy casts her out of herself and ravishes her above herself. Thus, indeed, the ardent and immense happiness, as it grows beyond human measure, bears a man away above himself, and raising him up beyond human things, supports him in divine regions. Is that like the happy get happier and the sad get sadder? We may see daily an example of this in the life of animals. Sometimes in their play, they leap up and their bodies remain for a short time in the air. Here we have the animals there. So often fish, playing in the waters, rise up above the water and go beyond the bounds of their native dwelling place, supporting themselves for a short time in the void. Do you ever see a flying fish? Why do they fly?
I do.
Why do fish jump out of the water?
They like to take a look outside.
Why do whales? Why do porpoises?
They like to see the sun and the sky. They come out when the sun sets to say thank you. Also.
Do you think humans should jump out of the sense world into the higher planes? So also the Holy Soul.
Everything likes to jump higher.
You want to jump out of your body?
Higher and higher.
Jump. So also the Holy Soul, when by the inward excitement of its fervor is cut off from itself, when it is moved by ecstasy of mind to rise up above itself, when it is carried away altogether and rests in the celestial world, when it is wholly immersed in angelic vision, seems to have transcended the limitations out of its native powers. If we rightly understand contemplative men by the mountains, and speculative men by the hills, see how correctly the mountains are said to rejoice like rams, and the hills like the lambs. For sometimes contemplation and speculation are used as equivalent terms, and thus often the true meaning of Scripture is obscured and confused. But we define speculation aptly and expressly when we say that we see through a glass, a speculum, but contemplation is when we see the truth in its purity without any hindrance or veil of shadows. So the hills rejoice like the lambs when we, that exalted right of Solomon's secret movements, lifts them up beyond themselves, that they may be worthy to see the hidden mysteries of heaven as in a glass and darkly. But the mountains rejoice like rams when the higher spirits, in the exaltation of their ecstasy, contemplate in the purity and simplicity of truth that which the lower spirits can hardly behold even in a glass and darkly. I gotta continue, I guess. It only gets higher and higher here. Chapter 15. That any ecstasy of mind transcends the limits of human effort or merit. You have to go beyond human effort. Let nobody presume upon his own powers for this exaltation or uplifting of the heart, and ascribe it to his own merits. Do you think you could ascribe it to your own merits? Or is it mostly from grace? For it is certain that this comes not from human deserving, but is a divine gift. Most of them are gifted, I suppose.
Most of the great things are gifts.
Merit. So that soul, however she may be, who is described as ascending from the desert, is said to lean upon her beloved. Would you have to lean upon a beloved? She leans when she's moved by her strength and not by her own power, and I say to rely. What happened? To rely. I say to rely upon her beloved means that she does not presume at all upon her own strength in this matter. As far as I can see, she is right in not counting at all upon her own effort nor on her own abilities, especially in that place where she comes up from the desert, nor even in the desert when she goes through it. And this beloved of hers knows it well, and therefore leads her on in a cloud by day and night by the light of fire. How indeed could she bear the burden and heat of the day under the shadow of him whom her soul loveth? And that safe place would she find from the fears of night, especially in that region of terror and vast solitude, unless she sent forth his light. Unless he sent forth his light and his truth, therever she would have nothing whereby to temper the heat of desire, unless the power of the Most High overshadowed her. And again, she would be without enlightenment in the darkness and her ignorance, unless she saw light in his light. And this is the meaning of what she says to him, for thou, quote, for thou lighteth my lamp, O Lord, and, O my God, enlighten my darkness. Oh. They just want to get lighter. Everybody wants to get lighter. Seems like all you're doing is getting out of darkness to light. You get more light. Therefore, the beloved, by the gift of her beloved and the generosity of her bridegroom, receives two remedies for the two chief evils, the cooling cloud, or the concupiscence of the flesh, and the light of revelation for ignorance of the mind. Seems you have to cool down the body and lighten up the mind. You think we have to cool it? So how do we cool the body and enlighten the mind?
Just don't think. Just don't think without any thoughts.
Does thinking create heat?
Absolutely.
You ever get like angry or get like think a lot or like worry about something and feel you're getting hotter? How often a man knows the way of truth but does not take it, being drawn away and enticed by his desire. So he has a day of knowledge but not the cloud of cooling grace. Grace is cooling. And in fact, the inner light can be cool. We could have a humongous sun, right? And its light is cool. And so how the inner suns are cool. Not cool or hot. Cools your mind. And how many have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge, and these perchance feel no heat of desire for the time, breathe quietly in the coolness of the night. And these men seem to have the night, but have not the fire of illuminating grace. Therefore it is good to hope in the Lord, and not presume upon oneself. How blessed are they to whom he is as a covering by day, and as the light of stars by night, spreading the cloud over them for protection, and sending the fire to lighten them by night. And then it is not of him that willeth, nor of him that runneth, but of God that sheweth mercy. He shows mercy, sheweth. They have the mercy seat. You know what a mercy seat is? You could take mercy upon yourself and sit on your meditation pad. You could call it your mercy seat. They have these old words. Sheweth. What's the other word? I want to sit on my mercy seat and have God sheweth mercy to me. We could speak in Old English or Old French. The beloved knows this and therefore leans on her beloved, for rightly is it written of her. Who is she that cometh up from the desert, flowing with delights and leaning upon her beloved? We could actually finish this book. Want me to keep going? Chapter 16. How in the third mode of ecstasy everything depends upon the divine gift. God, when you get to the end, it just says you need the divine gift of grace. So all this work of our contemplative studies. Gosh, I put in all this effort to read this book, and now it says I just need a grace and a divine gift. God.
You cannot do it yourself.
Yeah, I can't do it myself. I mean, I was trying to read this book by myself. And now it says, although this beloved of her bridegroom always and everywhere needs help from her beloved so that she cannot do anything without him, nevertheless she relies most firmly upon the cooperation of her own soul. Well, I could cooperate. Let's say I need the divine gift, though, right? But how do you get it without cooperation? You had to participate in the process. I cooperated by sitting in meditation. I was cooperating and ought to do so, especially in the place from which she cometh up from the desert and at the time when she is flowing with delights. Sometimes you have to just be there at the right time and the place. And the one guru online, the one guru on YouTube, he says it's 3:40 a.m. Where did you come up with this stuff? The time to get the divine grace is exactly 3:40 a.m. So if I sit at exactly 3:40 a.m., I can get the flowing with delights. Consider then the state of those who are in delights of this kind. Rejoice in having nothing in their own power. The soul cannot be comforted at all without them, nor can she acquire them by her effort or any foresight. All comfort and gladness depends upon the will and good pleasure of another. Therefore she is right to lean upon the strength of him on whose generosity she can truly count for all that she hopes, desires, and loves. Or how often in this state she hears the warning words of the prophet change for her into the word of the Lord, quote, command, command again, command, command again, expect, expect again, expect again, a little here, a little there. Isn't that a cute line? Huh? That's really cute. Isaiah, we're reading the Old Testament now. Isaiah 27:10. Vulgate. Command, command again, expect again, expect again, a little here, a little there. Is that what happens in meditation? I expected to have a good meditation, and then I had one that was good, and then the next time it was not so good, and then it was better the next time. You know why I meditate in the evening? It often improves your morning meditation, but having meditated in the morning improves your evening meditation. So it must be circular. Therefore she is compelled to expect and to go on expecting, while her desires often differ greatly and for long, while she can neither have her delights at will nor refrain her soul from these desires. What if you desire mystical experience? What if you desire the delights of religious inner experience? For this, I think, I will appear how far everything that is done in this, felt in this ecstasy of mind, is above man and transcends human categories. Well, you have to cooperate. You have to put in effort, I suppose, they say. That's why those Zen monks, they sit like a dead tree stump, just sitting there like a dead log. But their problem is they need devotion and love, right?
Devotion comes slowly.
It's not. You can sit there like a dead tree stump.
You read it before, didn't you read it? Desire comes first.
Yeah, well, desire. Yeah, even earlier in the book. I'm going to continue. Chapter 17. I'm almost to the end, so I'll try to finish. How a man who has arrived at this third degree may help himself. How can you help yourself? This is the third degree, so this must be advanced meditation now. Nevertheless, when one has arrived at this grace and feels it to be taken away from him more than is usual, there is something which he should do to help himself by some means to regain it, and dispose his soul suitably for this end, as far as in him lies. Do you think I had the grace and then it was taken away and I'm trying to regain it?
Sometimes, you go into school, you get an A in a class, and then later on it goes down. You go to that.
Well, we had figured that I was the worst of all disciples. So it's not surprising that it was taken away. He's the worst. Kabir is the second to worst, and I'm the worst. In this case, the soul must recover its exaltation of heart by its own meditations to recall the gifts. I'm supposed to recall the gifts. I'm recalling the gifts of the divine goodness to the eye of memory. Memory, my memory is my, somehow, my memory is my meditation. The gifts of divine goodness to the eye of memory. Can you use your memory to remember the gifts of the Master as a weapon against what? Despondency.
Against other thoughts. I think you should keep if you are to think of anything, better keep good thoughts then.
Think good thoughts as a weapon against bad thoughts, and dam up the bad thoughts with a dam of good thoughts. So your thoughts aren't damned. If you dam your thoughts, if you dam your thoughts, if you dam your thoughts, you will not have soul. You do not have damn thoughts. Damn. The gifts of divine goodness to the eye of memory by such a recollection move itself to deep and devout thanksgiving. So if you were thankful, you could become thankful for the thankful that you're even thankful. That finally, from the center of the heart, it must allow that inward organ of spiritual harmonies to break out in divine praises. When by efforts of this kind the inmost feeling of the heart is released in full devotion in the splendor of the divine praise, I might put what follows thus. It is as if an air hole were opened through which a breath of heavenly sweetness and abundance of divine comfort are poured into the small vessel of our heart. This is illustrated when Elijah the prophet, having been asked for the word of God and feeling that he had not the spirit of prophecy at that time, had a minstrel brought to him. When he had come and played him, immediately Elijah drank from in the spirit of prophecy, and straightway opened his mouth in words of prophecy. Perhaps someone will ask what is meant in the story by the prophet of the Lord asking for a minstrel. We need a musician. Or by his receiving the spirit of prophecy when he sang. But we have experienced commonly that music is wont to refresh a hard heart. Want, W-O-N-T, and bring back its joys to memory. Now he's saying we need music, to play a bhajan, to play and certainly the more, so I guess if he's saying to play music if you fell out of grace and you're trying to recover.
Maybe that's why you're a musician.
You need a musician, a minstrel.
That's why you play it.
The reason I play the piano is to recover from my lack of devotion.
From your fall.
From my fall from grace. Well, I fall very frequently from grace, and certainly the more passionately any man's love affects his soul, the more deeply his feelings are touched by the harmonies that he hears. And the deeper the feeling, the more effectively is he renewed in his desires. So we need inspirational. Do you think we should play Bach cantatas?
Mm-hmm.
Should we listen to
Alexa?
Bach Festival on Alexa?
You like to finish what you're reading, or we don't?
Yeah, I have to. I'm almost done with the book, and we're getting to the better part, where we listen to harmony. Harmonies that he hears, the deeper the feeling, the more effectively is he renewed in his desires. And what we ought then to feel about that prophet is that the exterior harmony brought back to his memory that interior and spiritual harmony, and the melody he heard called his soul back and raised it to his usual happiness. And why should we not feel about spiritual and true delights what we truly experience in bodily and vain pleasures when one knows how the pure memory of carnal pleasures transports the mind to carnal pleasure? Why should not, therefore, spiritual light have the same and even greater effect upon spiritual man? For the melody which the prophet heard was in some sort of scale by which he rose up to his wonted joys. And that which is usually the cause of a downfall in carnal men caused him to go up higher. Let any man think how deeply and intimately he has been touched by the memory of that supercelestial sweetness. Wow. Supercelestial sweetness. At the voice of a singer, wow. Well, how it has ravished him beyond himself and restored the prophetic spirit and the feeling to the soul of the prophet. So this is like a monk here. Like a cloistered monk, he's saying you need good music. Do you think that's a heretic? He may be a heretic. What may? Chapter 18. We're getting closer to the end. What may greatly help in the renewal of this grace, and now you, O soul, whatever you are, who has used to flow with an abundance of delights and often to come up from the desert, leaning upon your beloved, to be raised suddenly and unexpectedly to these contemplative ecstasies, even to inconceivable raptures of joy, being almost carried away to prophetic understanding and revelations by divine inspiration, lean from the example of the prophet what you ought to do, and so that in necessity you may have a means at hand by which to restore its wonted joys to your soul. It may be useful for you, too, in such a case, to have a minstrel. This is like pro-musical. Yeah. Have a minstrel and listen to a singer. See, I'm self-absorbed trying to promote music. Remember, I'm the most narcissistic and worst disciple. To conclude briefly what we mean, what is this minstrel but the heart's exaltation in God? This is the kind of minstrel he desired us to have at hand. When the psalmist said, quote, "Be glad in the Lord, and rejoice, ye righteous, and glory all ye that are right of heart." Psalms what? 32:2. We're talking about David, the musician. By psalmody and praise, we prepare the way of the Lord, by which we felt safe to come to us and to reveal to us something of his wondrous mysteries. Therefore, he also says to us in another place, "Sing unto the Lord, sing praises to his name, make a way for him who ascendeth upon the west." And what does this ascent into the west mean? Common use is wont to call that region of the world where the sun goes down and daily the light fades away the occasion of the setting. What shall we more appropriately connect with the setting than the failing of the human intelligence? For the sun of the intelligence hastens to its setting and hides the rays of its knowledge, and the light of the earth may be said to turn into darkness of the night and withdraw all things from human sight. When the human spirit falls into ecstasy and dies to ordinary sense, and being carried away out of itself, knows nothing at all of what is happening around itself. What do we mean by the Lord's ascent when we consider it? It is the increase of the fruits of our knowledge by the shewing of his greatness. The more he reveals the sublime heights of his greatness, the higher he is exalted in the sight of our intelligence. So he ascends truly towards the west when he ravishes a man above himself, when he takes away the memory of all man knew by ordinary methods, and shows him in ecstasy something of the majestic greatness which he can never have understood in the common state of his life or within man's ordinary capacities. Let us therefore endeavor with great alacrity of mind to rejoice in the Lord, and let us stir ourselves to sing to him with heartfelt devotion, giving him something which he may use in his ascent towards the west. If we do this, we are offering a fitting song, and we hear the singer in the right way. In the spiritual soul will be touched to the heart at the sound of the song and moved spiritually by the rushing inflow of the Spirit. As the intellectual senses are open, the grace of prophecy will be renewed, and his psalmistry and spiritual harmony, the contemplative soul accustomed to spiritual experiences, will begin to dance and make gestures in the greatness of her soul and leap up, as it were, towards spiritual beings, and be raised up above the earth and all earthly things, and pass over wholly into ecstasy of the mind to the contemplation of heavenly things. This, then, is what we have said, may be a help to renewal of the mind, and often profitable for the return of lost grace. It's funny, I can recover my lost grace through music. Now we have the answer. The answer is going to be to turn on Bach Fest. Now we get the grand final chapter, chapter 19. We're beginning at the end of this book. Beginning of the end. This is the beginning of the end. Chapter 19. By what degrees ecstasy of the mind may grow. We have discussed the usual causes of mental ecstasy. Now we may add something about the degrees through which it develops. It proceeds upwards, sometimes from the bodily sense, sometimes above the imagination, and sometimes beyond the reason. Who would dare to deny the kind that is above the bodily sense, and that which is above the imagination, when the authority of the apostle testifies convincingly to that which is above the reason? I know a man, he says, whether in the body or out of the body. God knoweth such a one caught up in the third heaven. Corinthians 2:12-2. So how he had passed beyond human reason by ecstasy of mind, for he was utterly unable to discern what was going on around him. But the full explanation of this passage is better left to more learned men, rather than that we should presume to discuss matters so greatly beyond us. We should be better instructed in this by the skill of those who are led to the fullness of this knowledge, not so much by the teachings of others as by their own experience. To that summary of our subject, which we drew up with succinct brevity in our first book, we have now added a continuation planned on a wider scale, and as we said before, we have been speaking in a leisurely way to men at leisure. This is just a leisurely way of reading this. That's it, dear. That's the end. Richard of St. Victor. This is reading from Richard. What's that noise?
The water.
I'm just looking at this is not least in the science of the spiritual life. That's what we're talking about. Richard St. Vicar, title to distinction, lies in this, that he was the first writer to systematize mystical theology. He binds together some elements of Greek Christian thought, inherited from the pseudo-Denis and the Neoplatonist of the vain Occidental traditions of St. Augustine and St. Gregory the Great. What lies behind the great work on contemplation, the two Benjamins? This is the two Benjamins. We're reading Mystical Spirituality. Well, I can't read the whole book, so if you want to know more, you have to read the whole book yourself. What do you think, dear? This was our Sunday reading. Sun a day. Bye. It's an old book, by the way. Richard of St. Vicar, The Selected Writings on Contemplation by Clare Kirchberger.